Hi, my name is Kenneth Paul, and this is my woodworking shop. It's a genuine pleasure to have you here. Today's video is going to be Chapter 4 on making an heirloom wooden tool chest. In today's video, we will be constructing the frame and panel for the bottom of the tool till, and we'll be doing all the mortise work. The mortise work for putting in that frame and panel, the mortise work for all of the drawer guides, and the mortise work for the two internal support partitions. Alright, as always, if you find these videos useful or if you enjoy them, do me a favor. Like, subscribe, comment. You know the drill. Alright, let's get right to it today. Alright, I have the stock laid out for the frame and panel that is going to be the bottom of the tool till. Now, why are we using a frame and panel instead of a solid board? Let me explain. Side, let's say that's a side, this is an end. Now I've got that shelf going in here. If on the side, the grain's going the same way. On the end, the grain would be going 90 degrees to each other. Wood has very little movement along its length, but it has a tremendous amount of movement across the grain. So if I were to glue this board into this one, especially something 15 inches wide, what's going to happen is this movement is going to tear this apart. So by using a frame and panel, I'm going to have 45s in the corners. Everything's going to be tongue and grooved together. We'll be putting in floating tenons to strengthen all the 45 joints and this center. The panels will be free floating, but by having 45s, the grain will follow the outside of the box. There won't be any issues. Now the next issue we have, this bottom of the tool till is a shelf inside the middle of the cabinet, inside the middle of the tool chest. This will sit 5 1/4 inches down from the top. Then I'm going to have two center dividers inside for added strength. We've got the same problem there. You'll notice that ordinarily I would have the grain going this way on the center board. But underneath I'm going to have a center panel mortised into the bottom of this. And by having the grain going this way, it's going to be going the same way as here. That gives us another problem. The front of the cabinet, the front of the tool chest, is going to have the grain going this way. If I were to mortise this in and glue it, we're going to have the same problem. So what we're going to do is breadboard in grain at 90 degrees. This will face the outside of the cabinet. This will be the inside. What we're going to do is I've got 3 loose tenons. I'm going to tongue and groove this together, put the 3 tenons in, but we're only going to glue the center tenon. We'll shave the 2 end tenons to give a little bit more room, and that will allow this a little bit of expansion. We'll be able to glue this to the outside of the box. We'll be able to glue this to the top and bottom because the grain will match. And we'll be able to have these 2 pieces of 90-degree grain only connected in this one center spot, which is going to allow movement. You have to allow for wood movement. If you're under 6 inches, it's not that big a deal, but once you get to 12 inches, 15 inches, there's a lot of wood movement that you have to deal with. This is how we're dealing with it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is run my tongue and grooves. I've already done all my loose tenon work except for the 45s. I'll show you me using the Jessom pocket mill again when I go to do the loose mortises, the loose tenons on my 45 joints. But the rest of them are all cut in. So I'll be cutting my grooves on these, grooves on the sides. Then we'll have the tongue on the ends and the tongue all the way around our panels. So let's set up and let's get the routing done for the tongue and groove section of this. Alright, I've got the dust collector going. I've got the groove portion of the tongue and groove router bits installed. Let's run some grooves. Now we'll set up for the, I'll do the rest of the grooves and then we'll set up for the tongue. Alright, now we're set up to run the tongue. Let me show you. Those are the locations. Let me see if we can make sure we got this in focus. This is the location for the 3 tenons. That'll be our groove. I'm going to run the groove on the rest of them and we'll move forward from there. Alright, let's move on. Alright, I've just finished cutting the 45s. For the surround on the frame and panel. Let's get that in. Make sure we're focused here. Damn it. Here we are. I've already mortised these 2 loose tenons in here, so there'll be 2 loose tenons here. And there'll be 2 loose tenons here. And as I was saying, the grain runs all the way around. So now when I glue this into its mortise, we'll be following the grain everywhere we need to go. And here in the middle, these haven't been cut to length obviously yet, or width. But when these sit in place, whoops, this section, hang on, let me lay it down. This section will have its grain aligned with this middle section, so I'll be able to glue this section. And this upright section will have the grain going the same way as the upright. So what we need to do now, to strengthen these 45s, we're going to mortise in these floating biscuits in the corners. We're going to use the same Jessom pocket mill that we used earlier for joining the 2 boards that make up the base of the tool chest. Alright, let me show you one more time on that and then we'll get assembled. Alright, here we have the Jessom pocket mortise mill again. Now, I've already drawn mating lines on all the 45s where I want to put my loose tenons. This edge of this opening goes right on whatever line you have drawn. So, right. Right there is good. Square that off a little bit. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to drill a series of holes. And then once I've drilled a series of holes, we'll go back and forward. That'll clear out the space in between and that'll give us the mortise we need for our tenons. All right. That's it. Get that back in focus here. And I'll make that mortise on all 4 corners, all 8 pieces, and then we'll be ready to start assembling this frame and panel. Alright, I'll start filming once I get this clamped up and we'll move on from there. Alright. Alright, here we have the frame and panel clamped up. Let's see what we've got here. Now that frame is done, now we can start with our mortising work. Alright, I'll take that out of its clamps when it's dry, give it a sand, and put that aside to take measurements off of for the thickness of the mortises we're going to do. Alright, let's move forward from here. On to the mortising. Alright, what we have here is I'm starting to route in the mortises that will hold the bottom of the tool till. Now we can see on the back, this is the inside of the back panel. I've already started doing the route. I'm going to be doing the route in 2 passes. I'll explain why in a moment. Here I have my straight edge set up. I've got this same, let me see if I can get in focus here. I've got the same reference line on all the pieces that I'm putting my straight edge on. My straight edge is locked in and clamped down. I've got my router bolted to a CRB7 router base. What I like about this router base is it lets me change the position of the router by spinning this wheel. So right now I've got a 1/2 inch upcut spiral router bit in my router. I've got it set where it's just catching the top of the line that I need for my mortise, and instead of trying to find the perfect size bit for my panel, I'm able to just trace my panel, run 1/2 inch, then using the adjustment wheel, slide the router bit over until it just touches the other side of the line, and now I can get the perfect mortise for whatever size panel I'm putting in. I'll show you in a moment. I'll set the camera up, but this is the inside of the front panel. To the bottom of the mortise is 6 1/4, which will give me a 5 1/4 inch till, plus the width underneath the coopered top. And below will be my 3 drawers on each side, and then a lock miter joint on the bottom. Alright, let me set up and I'll show you a pass on the router. Alright, let's make a pass with the router. right. And you'll notice this blue tape I have here on the ends. That's to let me know where the 3/8 is. This is a stopped mortise. I'm stopping it 3/8 of an inch from each end because this, obviously I don't want the mortise showing on the ends. All right, let me show you something on the raised panel that I forgot to mention to you. One moment. Something I had meant to mention on the assembly of this raised panel, because these 45 corners all have a loose tenon running at a right angle, you can't assemble this the way you would ordinarily. Ordinarily, you would just clamp your style goes up and down. My rail. I would take my rail, my top and bottom rail, and I would clamp them into my center stile. Then the ends I would just put on. But because we're set at a 45, we couldn't slide in. So you have to do all 4 corners have to be brought in at the same time. So you have to lay everything out, glue everything up, and then start applying equal pressure on all the corners to get these loose tenons to go in at the same time. Just so you're aware of that. All right, I'm going to continue mortising. I'll show you when I set up to do, we've got some center mortises to do. We've got mortising to do right across for the draw slides. I'll set you up and show you those. But in the meantime, I'm going to finish running the mortises for the tool till on the front, back, and the 2 sides. All right, let me get that done, and then we'll move on from there. All right, what I'm doing now is continuing to run the mortises. I have finished running the proper width of mortise that the bottom of the tool till, which is this raised panel, will fit into. Now I'm in the process of making the vertical mortises that'll house the center dividers. You can see this one still has one pass to make. This one has been completed. This is the bottom of the raised panel that will make up the bottom of the tool till. Now you can see here in the center, I left 1 1/8 inch. I ran my mortise. This is where my center divider will be. This is where my center divider will be. The reason I'm doing it in 2 pieces and leaving this middle is because I'm going to be putting a locking mechanism for the 6 drawers, and I need this 1 1/8 with a gap between the 2 center dividers for that locking mechanism. This is the locking mechanism of my own invention, and we'll be doing an entire chapter just on that locking mechanism. Now what we have here is I'm set up with my router to continue the 2 mortises on the bottom of the toolbox. What I do is I have a spacer board that I have clamped flush with the edge, and then I have my CBR7 router adjusted. If you look inside there, you can see when I push down, it's just on the line. That's why I like having this. I can use a smaller router bit and then make an adjustment so that in 2 passes I can always get the exact width I'm looking for. All right, I'm going to continue running these mortises, and then we're going to set up to run the mortises. This is the front panel, and the front and back panel I'm going to have to run 3 mortises for the draw slides. So I'll have them stopped 3/8 from the edge, just like this one. So I'll run, I'll experiment in a moment. I believe I'm going to run 10 millimeter draw sides, draw glides. All right. I'll start up again when I start making the mortises for the drawer glides, and I'll explain why I'm going with 10 millimeter. Alright, that's it for now. Where we are right now, I'm about to route the 3 mortises on the inside of the back panel that I will inset the drawer guides into. I'm using I know I said I was going to use a 10 millimeter rod bit. I'm actually using a 3/8. Let me show you why. This is a 3/8 mortise with a 3/8 block in it. This is a 10 millimeter groove. This will be the drawer. This will be my glide. 3/8 of an inch is 0.375 inches. 10 millimeter is 0.397. That's 2/1000ths of an inch bigger. So I'll route 3/8 for my guide and then 10 millimeter on the sides of my drawers, and that will give me the free play I need for them to be able to slide easily. How I'm spacing this, I have a strip of wood clamped flush with the top of the board, the back. I'm going to run my first groove. Then I'm going to transfer this board to the front panel, and I'll put my first 3/8 mortise on the inside of the front panel. Then I'll rip a little bit off this board, clamp it in place, again flush with the top, run my next mortise, and then I'll transfer this piece of wood to the front. I'll do the same thing. By doing that, I'm using the same reference point every time, and I know that all of my mortises are going to be in line left and right and parallel with each other. Alright, I'm going to start routing this in. Let me show you the first one. Hang on. Alright, you'll also notice I have a stop on each end that'll stop my router 3/8 of an inch away from the end so that I don't route all the way through. And there we have our first mortise. Alright, I'm going to move over to the front board, do the same thing, and continue down. I'll show you when I'm finished, and then we'll discuss where we go from here. Okay. Alright, and this brings us to the end of Chapter 3 on making the tool chest. All my mortising is now done. My frame and panel is now built. This is the mortise for the frame and panel, which will be the bottom of the tool till. These are all the mortises for the drawer guides, left drawers, right drawers, front and back panels. These will be the end panels, mortise for the frame panel. The rest of this board will be cut into drawer faces. Same on this one. Frame and panel, then cut into drawer faces. Then we get the bottom. And then we have the frame and panel, that'll be the bottom of the drawer till. And again, we have the 1 1/8 on this panel and on the bottom. That will be used for support for our drawer locking mechanism, which we will deal with in a later video. Alright, next chapter, on chapter 4, we actually start some of the joinery work. We'll be doing the box joints, and we'll be doing the lock miter joints, which will join the edges of the bottom to the edges of the front and back panel. All right. Well, I hope to see you on chapter 4. And again, if you find this video useful or you found it entertaining, do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment. You know the drill. All right, see you in the next video.